All right, this is going to be the best part of the opportunity tonight. We get to hear from these fabulous ladies. I'm going to use the word young ladies. Can I use young ladies? All right. Don't let this gray up here fool you. I'm young. I'm like the new kids. They go out there and they dye their hair gray. I did that. So I get the opportunity to ask each of you a few questions about leadership, about leading during chaos. It's about you, not me. So I'm so glad not to be at the Secret Service in a moment. One of the key questions that we have for you ladies is, what actually drew you to federal government? And what's something that you find unique about your role in working in the federal government?
I've always been drawn to government service. I was working in government before I became a federal employee. And truth be told, I enjoyed what I was doing. I was an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn, New York, and it was the same sort of job, keeping people safe. And a woman I happened to intern with while I was in law school came to Washington to be the first inspector general at the Department of Commerce. And I called her up to congratulate her, and she said, "How would you like to come to Washington?" So that was almost 45 years ago. I thought I'd go back to New York because I am a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker even today. But I met my husband, Michael, and his work was here. He's a chemist, by the way, not a lawyer. And I stayed, and it suited me very well. I have never felt more gratified than working for the federal government, working for government in many different areas. And I have always felt that the jobs that I did were important and that it was good to be in a place where I can make a difference for the American people.
And you've done just that, especially getting 3 million people through 450 locations.
I don't do it personally, but there's a whole system set in place to get that done.
But being the key architecture for that, because I too was at the Pentagon on 9/11 and recognized that all planes were landed. And we had to rethink about how we actually went back into the airports and how we fly and how we protect it during that time frame. And you're the architect of that.
That's right. A lot of smart people get together, and it's done as a team. And security is always about what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and how it gets paid for, and what level of risk are you prepared to take. So fortunately, there are a lot of good subject matter experts that help with all of that, including the lawyers on occasion.
Thank you. Now I'm going to move to my counterpart, Ms. Caryl, who's sitting next to me. How about you?
When I started my career, when I was deployed to Afghanistan, I was not yet a government civilian. I was not on the government side. I was at the Center for Naval Analysis. And what drove me nuts is that I could make recommendations to the federal staff about things that I thought could be done better. So I'm a proponent for good government. And sometimes people would take the recommendations and sometimes people would not. And I found it frustrating. So my best friend and life coach sitting in the front row over there encouraged me to apply for a position that I thought I wasn't ready for. And he said, "Why not?" I was self-limiting. And I got in. I got into the government and I was able to contribute. Because at the core, I'm a servant leader. Took a lot of growth classes and leadership development to put terms around what servant leadership means. But it was having impact. We even had a visioning session about what we wanted for our children and what I wanted for myself. And that was I wanted to be having impact in the world while being the best mother that I could possibly be. I didn't even have kids yet, but I knew that's what I wanted to be. So for me, being in the federal government is about having impact. What I love about our role is that also having 2 children taught me I really care about fairness more than I ever realized. It's like when you hit a core value, you find it. And I did not join the OIG community. I've been in 4 departments. I was in 2, and then I joined the OIG community, and I absolutely love it because it's about impartiality. It's about objectivity. It's about fairness, following the facts, and getting to the truth.
And getting to good government.
And getting to good government, making recommendations, making things better. So for me, I'm like in my sweet spot. I'm in a happy place. And I'm also at a point in my career now where it's about paying it forward and figuring out how to grow. And I'm looking at 2 women that are amazing in the crowd and trying to encourage them to see the strengths that they bring to the table. But it's also our entire team that we have at DOI OIG. We've brought on new execs. We brought on 7 new executives in the past 3 years under our tenure. And for me, those are the folks that I'm trying to grow because they're the future of our office and they're going to go to other places too. So that's what drives me. That's what motivates me.
Well, awesome. And speaking of good government, Orice. I mean, that's really what GAO is all about. I know when I was in my federal service, we said, oh, great, GAO is coming. But it was really all about good government and making us better. So how about you? What kind of drove you into this opportunity called public service?
So I'll have to be really honest. I've always referred to myself as the accidental public servant. I have an MBA and I wanted to work on Wall Street. And when I graduated with my newly minted MBA, the market was still recovering from the 87 market crash. So I had to think of a plan B career. GAO came to campus. I found out they had an office in Norfolk, which was actually in Virginia Beach. And I said, I'm going to apply to GAO. So the beach drove me to government. But the first week on the job, I knew I'd found my true calling, and I never left. Didn't plan to stay, but the mission really spoke to me, being able to do work on behalf of the American people to make sure government is doing right by them. That's what has kept me in government more than 33 years later. And I can't imagine doing anything else. And I think GAO's unique vantage point of having the purview of all of government is also a huge draw. I have an opportunity to learn every day. The reports that I read range from, weapon systems to small business programs to healthcare oversight. So I get to do something new and different every day and feel that I really have an impact. And we do as an agency on the lives of American people.
Well, this is going to be the next interesting question. And I actually had it as one of the last questions, but I drove it to the top only because I resonate with this myself. And in each of your respective roles and throughout your career in federal service, can you describe a time when you had to navigate through chaos? I know we talk about government being a bureaucracy, but we're talking about really true chaos, something that you showed up to work and you go, whoo, didn't see that one coming. Okay. And what did you do? What were some of the lessons that you learned in the process of leading through that tumultuous time? So what we'll do is we'll start with you, Caryl, this time.
To be fair, I have 2 examples ready to go, so we can always riff off each other. But the one I'll jump in with was the pandemic and trying to plan for coming back to the office and what that was going to look like and how chaotic it was. And you could develop a plan. And then if y'all remember, right, it was Delta or Omicron. So I very much felt like Chicken Little saying, we're coming back. No, we're not. We're coming back. No, we're not. It was a lot of communication. At the end of the day, it was just making sure that we were communicating, even if we didn't have updates, telling people we didn't have updates or telling people what we expected, trying to navigate that, updating policies, trying to give flexibility. But we have a lot of folks, right? Orice probably feels this too. Some of our disciplines very much want the black and white policy and the standards, and they wanted to know exactly how much time do you want me in the office, because we'd had several years of the pandemic where office spaces, you could only be in the office a certain percentage of people, a certain amount of time. They wanted to know, how much do you need me there? When? Just tell me. The hardest thing was transitioning to say, you are empowered leaders. You know your teams better than we do. We need you to make those decisions. So trying to lead through that with a lot of uncertainty for people not feeling comfortable, with a lot of emotion, but just creating a space to people to ask questions, have lots of ongoing conversations. I think for us, I told Mark our FEV scores last year, we were like number 7 out of 432 subcomponents on the FEV specific score. And I owe that to the team helping think through policies, communication, and just getting out there and making sure the staff felt like they had the information they needed.
But how were those first 5 to 10 days? Because I clearly have it in my mindset when I said, everybody go home and don't come back tomorrow during COVID. and you were grabbing laptops, you were grabbing paperwork, some people were walking out the door with monitors. They had forethought to take monitors. I didn't, but some took monitors. And what did you do? How were you guys operating for those first 5 to 10 days? I mean, that's when the scare was. And we had no idea, like you said, when we were coming back.
We had no idea. And I actually transitioned jobs during the pandemic. So I was still at HHS OIG in March of 2020, and we'd had a leadership offsite that week where folks came together, and we had our first patient get sick with COVID, one of our folks from a different region. And I had actually gone into the office on the Friday, not getting the message from everybody saying, don't come in, get your laptop, go home. I went into a very empty building, wondering if I could touch anything, what I needed to do. And also at the same time, you're realizing everybody's dealing with life. I mean, how do you do virtual kindergarten, right? Go home is going to be 2 weeks. Go home is going to be 2 weeks is what we kind of figured out. So I think at that time, even for HHS OIG, it was still over communicate, try to support each other, try to support colleagues, because this is a shared experience we all had to go through. For me, then transitioning to this opportunity, even during the pandemic, for me, it was, I'm going to come into the office when Mark's in the office because I need to learn my boss, right? I need to figure out what we're going to do. But there was a lot of uncertainty. And so trying to communicate and set expectations about what we wanted virtually, how we were going to do informal communications and connections, just to make sure people felt safe, that they felt safe. So we talked a lot about the safety plan. I'm sure people got annoyed with us talking about the safety plan, but we had a safety plan, right?
And safety was the key that got us all through. So Orice, I mean, you have all those auditors and, most of them are introverts. So, the COVID probably didn't bother them too much.
So I think that was definitely a chaotic time, and I was actually the managing director of congressional relations when the pandemic started, and I transitioned into this role during the pandemic.
Okay, I don't envy you now.
But I think what we did as an organization, and we were fortunately well positioned to do it because we had already moved to expanded telework, so our IT was ready. We were ready. But when we told people to go home, I remember packing up, but I remember taking all of my plants. So somewhere I knew that it was not going to be a quick return. So I did. I took my plants home with me because I didn't think we'd be back for a while.
I had a cactus and it didn't make it.
Yeah, lots of dead plants in the building. But in terms of the over-communicating that Caryl talked about, one of the things that the executive committee started to do, they would have regular meetings with the staff. We would have, we call them town halls. And we actually moved to a monthly cadence, and we continue to have them today because we discovered that people really liked having that level of communication on a range of topics, and we will likely continue to have these going forward. So it is a monthly conversation that we have with the entire agency. And it's been a great way to communicate information. People can send questions ahead of time. But we also had lots of conversations with our managers. And also to Carol's point, this was a change for managers, and it's going to require a change going forward because I think in many ways they could kind of set it and forget it in terms of leading, but they're going to have to lead into and be proactive leaders, and that's the conversation that we're currently having with our leadership team, that there are decisions that they're going to have to make. The agency is not going to be able to give you a black and white rule that you can lead to. You're going to have to apply judgment to the situation. And sometimes you're going to have to make a call that may be unpopular. We're going to support you in that, but we're trusting you to do that as leaders. And right now, that's a lot of the conversation and energy that we're having with our leadership team. But it was a chaotic period for us, no question.
And I'm sure it was just as challenging for TSA. I mean, you had workers in the airlines that were still flying and people were still flying. By the way, you got the best fares. I didn't go nowhere. I stayed home. But I heard people who were still flying. And I'm sure it was quite a challenge for TSA to get the folks going to work.
Well, it was a challenge because we had a frontline workforce and we lost a number of folks to the pandemic from that workforce. It was definitely a chaotic period. I don't think anyone really comprehended how a pathogen could take over the world like that. It certainly was not something that I had ever anticipated. But for me, the more chaotic time was 9/11, where you had an enemy that might strike again, and where the aviation system shut down. The country had been under attack, and leadership had to collectively decide what needed to be done in order to keep people safe and rebuild. So that was a very chaotic period. One of the people who helped stand up TSA is also in the audience today, Margot Bester, who served as my principal deputy for much of that time, being at Treasury and really seeing, unfortunately, that the government was not prepared for that attack. We didn't anticipate it. We didn't even really appreciate what was happening until quite a bit into the attack. And then fleeing the city, coming back the next day to figure out what needed to be done and how we could keep another attack from happening. When I went to TSA, we were sitting at desks in one room at the Department of Transportation, back-to-back desks, people who had never worked together before. Some of us had, but a larger and larger team that John McGaw assembled to help stand up TSA. And it was a very trying period in which I kind of practiced the 7 habits of highly effective people from Covey. Think with the end in mind, first seek to understand and then to be understood, think win-win. It was very important to focus on the mission, and you were operating with the fear that there might be another attack at any time. So that was a difficult period. And first it was the stand-up, and then it was the merger into DHS. So there was a period of a number of years where we were gaining ground, and we are so much more mature an organization today than we were 20 years ago. And every administrator who's come has found the organization at a certain place in its maturity and ramped it up further. So we have a lot to be grateful for, I think, with the leadership and the continuation of leadership with Admiral Bukoski.
Awesome. Thank you. So we've got about 5 more minutes. So what I'm going to do is this question is going to be kind of like speed dating. And the question is going to pretty much revolve around something that you can impart to the folks in the audience, but more importantly about those future leaders that are sitting in this audience today. And very succinctly, quick thought, what would you tell someone? What does excellence in leadership look like as a public servant? Because remember, we're starting the groundwork for the future. So giving you a moment to think it through. What does excellence in leadership look like for public servants for the future? And we will start with, we can start with Francine. She ended, we'll start with you, Francine.
This is one of my failings. I don't really think of leadership in the way it's often taught. And I've gone to a lot of leadership classes. I've seen podcasts. I've read books. And to me, I think what you have to find as the leader of the future is a repeatable process for yourself. Something that you can call upon no matter what the situation is, and kind of have the steps that get you to the solution if there is one, or at least a partial solution, hopefully. And so that's the way I think about the leadership. I worry about leadership in the future for the federal government because I'm not sure whether we'll continue to be able to hire the subject matter experts we need to have the guidance that we need in what are so many complex areas of endeavor that we're involved in. And that's something I worry about. I worry about coordination between the different federal agencies, between the different departments. I don't feel there's enough coordination. Sometimes I feel that each agency is its own fiefdom with its own constituency, and that there is not enough communication going across at all levels of government. And I don't think it should only be at the most senior levels, although that's very much necessary. But I think each of us as members of the senior executive service really need to do our part to reach out to our counterparts at other agencies and ensure that we are coordinating for the best answers for the American people. So those are some of the things that I see going forward.
Thank you. Caryl, what do you think?
I'm more hopeful for the future, maybe. I'm excited because at one point I thought, especially in the tech space, that we wouldn't be able to offer enough salaries. And I remember talking to some of the universities, and several of the people that I talked to were, wait a minute, we have one of the best missions. It's the calling and the purpose of public service that will bring in the talent that we need. I think excellence in government, though, comes down to 4 kind of values or words. So in lightning round: authenticity, empathy, courage, and trust. And if we have those, we'll be able to navigate all of these sticky issues.
My pessimism comes from what I read about transforming the civil service from the merit-based system we have now into something that may be more partisan as it was in years gone by. So that's where I become a little concerned. I do think that we have a high quality of candidates today and people that I'm proud to interview, hire, and serve with. But going forward, I don't think we can be assured that that will be the same system in place. And that's what leads to my concern.
Thank you. Now, Orice, over to you. You get the final words. Ready? Go.
I'm ready. So I agree with what's been said. There are a couple of additional things I would add. One, I think leaders have to be resilient. I think they also have to be flexible and adaptable. One of the things that you have to do as a leader is constantly evolve, because the folks that are coming in need something different from you. And the other thing, I think it's critically important for leaders to meet people where they are. A lot of leaders think that once they're in charge, then they get to set the tone and they get to do things their way. But you have to meet folks where they are and you have to adjust. So the relationship that you have with different individuals will be different depending on where they are. And I also think humility is important. I think you have to be willing to make a decision, sometimes without complete information, but I always say, you'll never accuse me of not making a decision. But in the face of additional information, I also will come back and say, now that I have more information, I want to go back and revisit that decision. And I feel no shame in doing that.
Great. Thank you. So we have come to the conclusion of this part of the program, but I would like everyone in the audience to join me in standing and giving these ladies a definite round of applause for what they have done for us in this nation.